we can only innovate within those spaces. Well, there is innovation we can do, but those hybrid and flexible learning models, which it says it's going to be something really interesting.
A school, probably a private school in the UK, will either adapt or start their own new private school that really kind of focuses on that alpha model.
I think people are going to be disappointed with it, and I think that comes from understanding what they mean or what people think this AI will do. That actually, if you don't read the small print, you don't read the privacy notice behind it, actually it's training the model. It's like, where's that information going? Which meetings should have these? Hello and welcome to Thinking Deeply about AI for Schools. I'm James Radburn, and joining me as always is Neil Almond.
For those just joining us, this is the podcast where we explore that rapidly evolving intersection of artificial intelligence and education. Every month we pose the big questions, examine what's changing in the AI and educational landscape, and try to make sense of what it all means for educators, students, and the future of learning.
And we're not here to give you all the answers because honestly, we're still figuring this out for ourselves. Now, instead, we want to create a space where we can think critically, question assumptions, and explore those possibilities. Each week, we're going to explore one topic, research article, AI update, and ask the ultimate question: what does this mean for education? So, as we kick off a new year, and like every good podcast they're doing at the moment, we thought it was a good moment to look ahead. And today's episode is all about the AI predictions for education in 2026. But before we rush forward, let's do what everyone does when they've got a new journal, a new planner. Let's review what we've done last year. Now, we didn't do this last year, so I found an article called the Digital Learning Institute. And it was titled Education Technology Trends to Watch in 2025. So as a bit of fun, let's have a look through those trends, see what was overzealous, what was actually in place, and where we are with those. And we will put all the links to any articles, anything we suggest in the show notes below, so you can have a look through yourself. So Neil, was there anything that stood out for you from that EdTech Trends of 2025 that they did, about a year ago now?
Yeah, it certainly is. And it's that, the Holy Grail of education, that AI-driven personalised learning, that was going to be sort of all solved and sorted out in 2025. So naturally, there was that prediction that there'd be those tailor-made learning pathways for individual pupils. The reality is, I think that we've had more teacher-facing tools than sort of pupil personalization. We've seen some experiments certainly in that field. We have alpha schools, which we discussed on the last podcast. We've had Google sort of tease Learn Your Way, which is meant to you upload a PDF of your syllabus, your curriculum, and that's then going to enable you to create resources that are tied to a pupil's sort of rough reading age, and then they'll be able to kind of create examples based on their interests. But that's only sort of been teased. So I think the reality is that we're still waiting.
Yeah, and I think that's with everything, though, isn't it? I remember when AI was first introduced, it was like, it's going to change everything. And so therefore, if we can personalize learning, that's going to be amazing, isn't it? But actually, the practicalities of it, it's not necessarily just the systems. Like, as you said, we're being teased by stuff by Google in particular, and Alpha Schools are looking at it. But what I think is a bigger barrier almost is this digital inequality. And if you look at some of the trends on there where it talks about hybrid and flexible learning models and gamification, it all comes back to devices and having the infrastructure as well. So there's a bigger barrier here than just AI.
Certainly is. And I think we need to we really interrogate what we mean by personalised. I think that's quite a loaded term in terms of what I certainly mean from it. I mean, you identify that exact right bit of knowledge at that right time, not necessarily, I like football, so all your examples are going to be football based, which I think is actually not useful personalized learning because how are you going to grow this child's scope of the world if all the examples that you're going to give them is just something that you already enjoy, I'm a great believer that, one of the many purposes of education is to expand that child's sort of immediate facilities of what they know and what they're interested in. And if our examples are just consistently, you've told us you like football, here's football, 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 I don't think it's going to get the gains that we really want it to either.
I think with that personalization, I think there's going to be a whole range of, as you say, what does that mean for the different pupils and students? And actually, from the cognitive science point of view, what is beneficial in terms of getting children engaged? Is that going to be something that washes over? And I've got that as one of my predictions later when we predict next year. Or is it going to be true learning? But I think there's another thing in here which is optimistic. It's about this hybrid and flexible learning models. And we discussed it a little bit last time in the last podcast that we are where we are in the UK, we're beholden to the assessment systems. So we can only innovate within those spaces. Well, there is innovation we can do, but those hybrid and flexible learning models, which it says it's going to be something really interesting. Are pupils going to want to have some enrichment, or are they going to be looking at a different way of schooling? And I think with Alpha School in the US and some other bits and pieces, it's an interesting concept that I think will develop, especially with a curriculum review and other bits and pieces happening. It could be quite an interesting space where it's forcing us to think about what is the purpose of education.
Quite rightly, sort of central UK schools' central role of safeguarding pupils as well. I think an attendance being what it is, certainly with the UK, like I think that's massive. And this idea that pupils and well, talking about secondary here are going to sort of have as long as you're on your hybrid learning by 8:30 and a little light bulb goes off on a dashboard somewhere that says so and so is logged in. I don't think we're getting to that point quickly, if at all, because of that safeguarding culture that we have here in the UK. In other countries, particularly about America, where that safeguarding culture isn't as prevalent, it might be more sort of likely and possible. But I think that's when you've got to think about those real sort of cultural differences between the purpose of the school system between these different countries has to really sort of come into it.
So we've unpicked what they've come out with an idea that actually we've made a lot of progress over the last year, but there's a lot of things that aren't concrete yet within education. So it'd be interesting when we come back to this episode in a year's time now, 2027, which seems mad because I can't even write 2026 yet. But it's that idea of actually would our predictions later come back? But I thought instead of asking us first, Neil, around what we think is going to come, I thought we should start with this idea that let's ask AI.
Nice.
What does it think about itself? How would it describe the future of AI in education? So I've got 5 different responses, and I used AI to create the prompt. And made sure it was very clear that I wanted a couple of safe options and one that was a little bit out there. And I went through all of these and chose these 5. So they're all from different large language models. So you've got ChatGPT, Grok, Claude, Gemini, and DeepSeek. So go step by step. Got my answers. Good Blue Peter moment here. Just got everything ready. So some of them you may be able to know because of the kind of where they are in the world and what they're doing. But let's see where it is from there. So the first one is a notable subset of K to 12 schools will restrict AI tool usage in classroom, prioritizing traditional methods amid growing backlash over academic integrity and screen time. So basically, reading between the lines is that there's going to be a backlash on this, and people are going to try to block it from the classroom. So which one do you think that alludes to? Which
It sounds very plausible and sensible. So particularly in that K part of it. So I'm going for Claude for that one.
Okay. Right. Shall I? What I'm going to do is I'm going to write your predictions down, and then I'll go through them at the end and let you know. Okay. So the next one is administration AI becomes standard but creates new compliance burdens. So schools widely adopt AI for report writing, but they spend significant time reviewing the outputs to make sure it meets this accountability.
I'm going to go for Gemini on that one.
Okay, okay. Sensible, sensible. Both of them are quite sensible approaches at the moment, aren't they? So AI, third one is AI will be more visible in assessment policy than in classroom teaching practices. So this talks a little bit around examinations and
Yeah,
that kind of it.
nice. Yeah, I could see. I think I could see ChatGPT given that one.
Next one, automated basic feedback on pupil writing becomes common. So it says by 2026, well, we're in 2026, that's a problem already. AI tools that provide immediate feedback on grammar, structure, and argument clarity in student essays will be widely available in secondary schools. However, due to safeguarding academic integrity concerns, their use will be strictly regulated. So there is like a yes, we use it for pupils, but we will be safe somehow.
Let's say for it. I'm going DeepSeek on that one.
And then the last one, the formal abandonment of AI detection software in schools. So they move away, they pivot away from AI detection to process-based assessment as a primary means of knowing whether a child knows something.
I mean, all schools should be in that position already. Famously, sort of very unreliable in terms of AI detecting whether itself is something's been used by AI to create it. Certainly in terms of text. I've only got one left, so I'm assuming you haven't done anything cheeky like not used one, and I have to use all five. So that has to be Grok.
Right, you have got two out of the five right.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you were right with the AI will be more visible in assessment. That's a ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
And you're right with DeepSeek on automated basic feedback on pupils' writing
Oh.
becomes common. The one that I was shocked with is the first one. A notable subset of K to 12 schools will restrict AI usage. You guessed Claude. It was actually Grok.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
that is quite surprising.
Gemini, you guessed Gemini for this one, but it was Claude administration AI becomes standard, but creates new compliance burdens. And then the last one was Gemini, the formal abandonment of AI detection software in school, which was
Hmm.
surprised that Google came up with. Yeah, it's interesting, but I was surprised by Grok because Grok's usually the one that's out there, and then it was like,
Yeah,
right, let's go against it.
yeah, and say from me using Gemini, it usually comes up with lengthier, more I don't want to say sensible, but
Yeah.
other different ideas to what I thought. Oh, that's interesting. Well, definitely, I'll include this in next week's newsletter to keep us accountable.
Hey, it'd be a good time now to go through our predictions with what we think will happen next year. Now, I think with any AI predictions, it could be so woolly and you could mark your homework right. But I think to keep us as true as possible and try and make it at least something concrete, we both Neil and I have come up with three predictions. Two of them are maybe safe, standard, what you're going to have put in there. And then the third one that's going to be a little bit more risky. And I think it'd be a really good conversation this time next year to really go back through and have a look at, see where we are with those bits and things. It could be based on trends that we're seeing. It could be based on hopes. It could be based on fears. But I think it'd be really interesting to go through it. So let's alternate through this. Neil, do you want to start with your first prediction?
Yeah, I'm going to start off with the wild card, and that is that a school, probably a private school in the UK, will either adapt or start their own new private school that really kind of focuses on that alpha model and uses sort of the alpha tech stack and philosophy to create this sort of 2 hours worth of academic work, and then the rest of the time is sort of these sort of personalised projects that you're interested in. We saw some notable people from the UK within that science of learning community go over to alpha schools and have a look at what was going on, and I think that's just going to kind of give potential credence to that model. and that there will be some people who will try to seek to replicate that in some form or fashion. Now, I don't necessarily mean that it will be sort of set up like a set up and sort of first cohort, but it will be at least announced in some form that a school, whether that be say a new school or like a Dulwich or an Eton, sort of announcing a sort of other campus to kind of try that out. But I kind of can foresee a future where those plans are announced at some point next year.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. Do you think they will follow the UK national curriculum? Do you think that's even possible?
As a private school, they don't have to. Obviously, there'll then be the case where they have to put them through the assessment system anyway. I think, given a private school, we can kind of assume the sort of parents that might be sending these pupils, and whether we'll never be able to know whether there's additional tutoring that happens outside to get them through the exams and all of that sort of stuff. But yeah, I can see it being done because I think there will be a subset of parents who are looking for something new and something different that the state schools just can't offer, but private schools have that ability to innovate more so than state schools can. And it will be used, I think, as an interesting sort of experiment that's not sort of imposed on state funded state pupils.
Yeah, and it's where that innovation comes, isn't it? Because I think US it's easier in some ways to innovate, whether it's through the assessments or whether the money and all of this. I think it will be fascinating. And I know we talked about alpha schools last time on the podcast, and but since then there's been even some more movement with some key, as you say, key notable figures going over that. So hopefully it's something we can come back to and explore in the future. But the online, even the online school movement, where parents are not happy or they can't find the right setting for their pupil. There's a lot more of online schools happening, not just homeschooling as well. So I think we're going to see that push and that revelation. And I think that's even come from the COVID and the fact that a lot of jobs nowadays are hybrid, whether at home or school, and what parents do with that, that this is more of a possibility than ever before. So it'll be interesting to watch that one. So my first prediction is about a curriculum evolution. Now, I think it's an interesting time at the moment where we are sat between, in the UK and England in particular, where we know there's going to be a curriculum review coming in place. But I think schools will feel the need and the pressure almost to develop their own curriculum strands. Now, when we say AI curriculum, I think it's going to be, that's almost the umbrella term, but it's more about the digital safety, the online literacy, rather than AI technical bits. And I think that efficacy, that ethics, that safety of what do you do is going to be really important. And if you see the amount of pupils who are using AI, whether it's using Snapchat because that's the one they're access to, or they're using the free versions online outside of school, I think that's where it's going to be. Now, in primary schools, it's a lot easier. You've got the computing curriculum, you've got PSHE, it's a lot easier to control that. Where you've got challenges is in that secondary, where pupils are going to be accessing it more at home. And some of these tools we've seen 13 plus from Copilot, Microsoft, Google, you've got Canva that are coming into the schools now that saying they're safe to use. But I think having that trend across secondary is a lot harder when you've got different subjects. You've got tutors, you've got PSHE, RSE, you've got some doing computing all the way up, all the way through, and some not doing it. So I think there is going to be, schools are going to take that ownership a little bit more and try and create a curriculum of some kind that will cover this.
Totally agree. And we know it's on a more sort of formalized version. This is coming on the horizon with what was announced with Becky Francis's curriculum and assessment review, which will obviously come into play. Is it September 26th or September 27th? I can't remember off the top of my head. But I think schools certainly shouldn't wait until then to put something in place. I think there's enough, certainly at primary, because I've spent some time looking at this myself, there's enough freedom within the curriculum statements for PSHE. Obviously, digital literacy, safe and computing safety is already there in the computing. It's just a case of considering, where we find the time to do it. etc., etc., which is no small task because we curriculum is pretty full in terms of the timetable, and finding time to teach more, arguably exceptionally important stuff, means that something somewhere might have to go. And as you say, teachers in primary have this a little bit easier because it's more, you can teach it in a more sort of incidental way. Those in secondary, where say your kids moving to and fro, far more difficult.
What's your second prediction then, Neil?
I think I mentioned it in the newsletter. I think towards the end of 2025, in that the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology announced that they're going to work with Gemini to create a sort of a custom model of Gemini that is sort of specifically trained on the national curriculum. Now, they weren't clear whether that's the current one or whether that's the sort of the new one that's going to be that's sort of currently sort of been written. I will assume that it's probably the new one. Why they would spend time training it on the old one when it's going to go out of date is sort of beyond me, but these things might be able to be possible to do both. And my sort of prediction is that probably by the end of this year, by the end of 2026, that will be available. That model of Gemini trained on these sort of on the national curriculum will be available in some sort of beta format for schools to have a try and see what it does effectively. Very little public detail on it apart from that this was actually happening. I think it makes some interesting competition for Oak National and Ayla, and the sort of AI tools that they provide. And it'll be sort of interesting to see whether they do go into sort of competition with each other, or there's a more sort of a collaborative approach between the two organizations, because obviously Oak have done a lot of work on their AI tools to make it sure that it's trained on sort of current national curriculum expectations as well as their own work. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Also interesting whether that then has an impact on schools potentially swapping from Microsoft sort of work environments and office environments to the Google Suite. If this Gemini model is going to be freely available, plugged into the Google equivalent of Excel, PowerPoint, and Word, etc., etc., it could make for some interesting discussions later on down the line when it eventually comes out in whatever form that looks like. But I'd be surprised if we don't see that by the end of the year.
I'm going to add a prediction on top of yours, subset. I think people are going to be disappointed with it, and I think that comes from understanding what they mean or what people think this AI will do, because you've got this simple almost search of materials, and can you create like a sequence of lessons or objectives or things like that. But then it comes back to not just the searching of the materials and being able to summarize them or to make those ideas of actually where does, let's say, transportation. I'm just thinking about primary history curriculum or science or anything like that. Where are the themes that go from early years all the way up to year 6 and beyond as well? It's those kind of ideas. But I think the other side of it is, what pedagogical model is it going to be added on top of that? So if people want to say, what are going to be the misconceptions of this year 6 lesson in science? Well, there needs to be a pedagogical understanding of this model to be able to create that. So I think this could happen in layers, but also there is a danger that it's going to dictate a pedagogical model as well. So I think, to be safe, it's going to do a certain amount, but it's not going to do everything that people want it to do, because Google and everyone else want to be quite play it by safe and make sure it is used as well.
Well, we don't know, but I don't think it will either have the sort of the depth of sort of pedagogical understanding that it needs for all these objectives. I think it'll make a pretty tech demo, and it'll make a pretty resource worksheet, potential Google slide deck based on your objectives, like sort of Ayla does right now. But yeah, I wonder the extent that it's going to be really useful. But we could be blown away.
Yeah.
If it's the end of 2026, a lot's happened in the last year that I would have said we'd be at this point. So, happy to be wrong.
Yes, I think from this we're both quite pessimistic about actually where things are going to be, but that's not always a bad thing. So we hopefully we can be blown away, and that leads into my second prediction, which is a necessary one, which is about this AI governance and compliance. And we've seen almost just less than a year ago, I think it was around the 12th, or no, the 22nd of January, I wrote in my notes that the DFE released these DFE digital standards for AI, but they were practical governance checklists for not schools necessarily, but for AI developers. So one of them one points in there was it shouldn't train the large language model. So if you're using it, it shouldn't train the large language model. Hence why usually if you're in a Google school, you use Google. If you're Microsoft, you use Microsoft because it's enterprise grade protected. Or some have GPT paid for OpenAI, ChatGPT education, and other bits and pieces like that. The Teams section of it. But what I think there is a theme, especially with the EU AI Act, which we're not under in England, where they wanted everything as a really high risk and really detailed, but they've almost pulled back what they're asking for schools. And what we've done over the last few years has been absolutely brilliant with the GDPR, the DPIA process, ROPAs, and everything here. But I think schools are going to now start taking ownership. Actually, we need to have a look at this. So if a DPIA was done 3 years ago on a tool, let's say a big homework tool that's out there, actually, have they updated it? Have they looked at it since? Because there's been AI enabled features that someone could turn on and quite easily, I'll start it by guiding pupils into you need to do more of question A or question B or this type of question and leaving a section. And schools may have a danger of actually not knowing that's happening if these things are turned on as well. And we see it a lot with transcribing meetings, people hiding recordings, quietly doing it on their phone or something else, and then there's some companies out there that actually, if you don't read the small print, you don't read the privacy notice behind it, actually it's training the model. It's like, where's that information going? Which meetings should have these privacy things, should have these meeting recordings in place and which not. And I read something just before we came on and started recording this, and Al Kingsley actually put an article about this, and he put this statement, which I think sums up my point more than anything else, is if we don't govern AI with intention, it will govern us. And I think this is the point where we need to take control from an education point of view, not to put a bit of guardrails in there to keep us safe, but also to allow us to innovate within a safe space. Too often we can just put guardrails up and we can't do stuff. No, we can't do that. Well, the danger with saying no to everything is pupils, teachers, leaders are going to find a way around it. There's absolutely no way of denying that. So what we need to do is how can we innovate within a safe space? And I think there's going to be a lot more guidance, or there's going to be some mats and academies are going to share their governance because a lot have already. A lot have got these systems in place, but a lot of these small schools and small academies who don't have the expertise or who don't at the moment have the recognition of this, it's a key element. I think there is something sitting between the traditional DPIA process and what's happening as well. It's quite a boring one, but quite one that I think is necessary to innovate.
Yeah, I foresee lots of senior leaders sitting on a computer, probably uh, at home, so that they can access these models to write many policies about the use of AI and what should be done, asking it to quote this legislation and the safeguards that the DfE provide, etc., etc. So yeah, I think it's going to happen, and one that I'm seeing quite a lot of right now on X. It feels like people just have finally sort of woken up to the dangers of Grok and what that can do in terms of deep fakes. So, people posting pictures of themselves, New Year's Eve. All you've got to do then is someone comes around, tags Grok in and says, can you, put this person in a bikini or a mini skirt and stuff like that, which was it's horrific behavior. And I think we're just going to see more of that in schools as well. And so I think schools getting policies, particularly around sort of the creation and sharing of deep fakes, is priority number one, I think, for coming back to school in the new year, if you haven't already got something like that in place. And say for my third prediction, that OpenAI. So in the US right now, OpenAI have a sort of a program. It's called ChatGPT for Teachers, and effectively it just gives you a dedicated workspace for teachers, group chats. You can work as a department or within year groups. You kind of tell it about your preferred sort of teaching style, curriculum, etc. It integrates with Google Drive, OneDrive, Canva, whatever it is that you want to use, and it has sort of admin controls as well. And most importantly, it's free, so you're probably getting a decent number of tokens involved in that. And it's only available right now to the US, and I can only imagine that that expansion is going to increase over the coming year. And I would be very surprised if they don't see that coming to, if we don't see that coming to the UK in some form, whether that's sort of at the trust level or sort of local authority. Or I would imagine for us, it would be just as long as you're an educator in England or Wales or wherever, you have access to it. I think because they're going to see that, mentioned earlier about Gemini and that sort of trained model. I think they're just going to do that to try and sort of remain a bit competitive in the educational market here in the UK. I'd be really surprised if this one doesn't come to fruition.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's going to be, surely they've got to let the government know of their intention behind this if they do it, and therefore what's the DfE's position on it. So that would be an interesting one as well. But yeah, I agree. I agree. I think there's going to be more scope because in some ways, ChatGPT was the founder of this. In some ways, we see it as the founder. It's the one that everyone defaults to, don't they? When they talk
It's
about
won the verbiage competition. So I think, I'm going to chat GPT it, is the shorthand for, I'm going to use AI to help me with this in the same way that I'm going to Google it became
yeah,
the default for searching. So I think they've definitely won that, which means that, and I hear from plenty of schools as well, even though sort of ChatGPT is not my sort of favorite of the tools out there, I've kind of switched recently to Gemini more and more. I do hear lots of schools prefer ChatGPT. And what kind of stops them sort of taking that step is that there is no way for us as a school to sort of subscribe to ChatGPT. That doesn't involve, that £20 a month sort of pro or plus plan, whichever one. I can't remember which one it's called, what it's called right now. I think it's pro, um, which is say 20 quid a month, and you have to do that for all staff. And that's a big outlay for schools right now. So if schools can get it for free and they have that dedicated workspace. I quite like the idea of sort of departmental year group sort of chats. That sort of seems to be a recent feature that they've added. I was surprised to see it literally over the last sort of few weeks. I think that's something sort of quite powerful about how you could sort of plan as a team whilst bringing AI into that conversation as well to help support. And that means you have sort of multiple humans in the loop, which again, I think is an also interesting idea rather than just that one person.
and we're starting to see that. We're starting to see all, let's say, Google, Microsoft, and ChatGPT actually integrate these tools into other ways. So it's not just prompting. And I think that's going to be where it really takes off. And so really interesting. See what happens with the big movers over the next year. So my final prediction is in two parts almost. So they're going to be more pupil-facing AI tools. Now, that's not going to be a surprise to anyone. Canva came out this year that's available for different ages, Gemini, Copilot, 13 plus, etc. But my concern, and I think it's more of a concern than a prediction, is that there will be a few AI tools that will suddenly be built by one or two developers. Because you don't nowadays, if you look at these companies that are building some of these tools aimed at education, there's not many of them within the development space of doing it, or in that company, and that comes its own danger for support and data protection and a lot of other things. But I think there will be a couple of tools that will be adopted by lots of schools quite quickly, and it will come to fruition that they are doing something untoward, whether it's training the model when they said they weren't, or they were doing other bits and pieces out there. I don't want it to become a brain gym 2.0. I don't want us in the education space to jump two-footed into something like a new AI tool that feels like it's going to promise the world and could, in the end, do more harm than good. Now, one reason why I don't, in some ways, I'm going to get counteract my own prediction that I don't think this is going to happen is we're a lot more discerning in the last few years around not only just technology, but also actually, is it making an impact? The cognitive science in our profession over the last, let's say, 5, 6 years has gone through the roof compared to when Brain Gym came out. We're questioning these kind of concepts a lot more, but I still have an underlying concern that we jump two-footed into something because the teachers found it amazing, they're using it in school, and it could come out and say, actually, no, it's not making any difference.
Which is always the concern, isn't it? That it doesn't. Well, I mean, and yeah, I think that's right to take that cautious approach to such new technologies. We obviously don't want to invest, the biggest resource of schools is teachers, and their most precious resource is time. You've got to make sure that the time that you're training them up in anything new, you're quietly confident that it will have an impact at the end of the day. So making sure that we get it right first time is really important. And as I say, I think AI, and it might have been true for the interactive whiteboards and stuff like that. But I feel like there was probably like a less societal pressure to adopt that technology, and I kind of feel like you wouldn't have parents asking a senior leader, so what is your approach to smart boards and interactive whiteboards? Because they're going to fundamentally change teaching among as a concerned parent and a stakeholder in this school, want to know what's going on. But I feel like with AI, I feel like more sort of parents would have that conversation. Hopefully, governors will have that conversation as well with senior leaders who are on that, who attend those sort of governing body meetings. And so, I'd be very happy for schools not to adopt any pupil-facing AI until there is certainty that no harm will come from this. I think we've seen it from we've talked about earlier. We've seen damaged mobile phones, unfettered access to the internet, social media, and all of that stuff. I think we've had enough examples where the jumping into technology has bitten us as a profession that it's about time that we heed those lessons and take that far more cautious approach to this and not feel that we have to based on societal pressure, either from the government or that sort of stakeholder pressure that you might have in a more sort of micro scale within your organization.
Yeah, well, I think there is a bit of hopefulness in that, and the fact that we will be a lot more discerning than we ever have been with it. I think it'd be fascinating in 12 months' time to review those, see where we are, score ourselves, and it could be an annual thing that we're looking at. But for our listeners out there, it'd be really interesting to see what you want from this, thinking deeply about AI for schools over the next year. What topics do you want us? Are there research articles that you would like us to look at, explore? Are there guests that you want to bring on and that we can talk to as well and discover? So please feel free to reach out to both Neil, myself, and also through the newsletter to find out more.
Great. Well, I'm really looking forward, James, to seeing how this year progresses, seeing how wrong we were, mostly.
I hope we are wrong. I hope we are wrong on some more things, and I hope there is more positive than the pessimism that I seem to put through mine somehow.
Yeah, that's fine. That's what we're here for. That's what this whole newsletter is. AI for schools has always been about, isn't it? That healthy sort of pessimistic view that it's not going to change everything, but there is some useful stuff there. So I hope you really enjoyed sort of listening to this conversation. Please subscribe to the AI for Schools newsletter. Comes out every Tuesday at 4 p.m. No more than a 3.5 minute read, I would say. And we're hoping to do some more interesting things across this year as well. Some sort of micro videos, CPD explainers. So do keep an eye out for all of those.
Thank you, and hope you have a brilliant start to 2026. Take care.
Take care, James.
Bye.